right, I think the music has stopped, so that must be our cue to begin. All right, so welcome to the Simi Valley Interfaith Council virtual open house, faith and spirituality discussion. And tonight, a discussion on pagans, Wicca, and witchcraft with a member of the Simi Interfaith Council, Wendy Sengpiehl. Wendy identifies as a traditional modern witch. I love that. Modern and traditional, all together. Has led the local coven for like 25 years and been speaking on witchcraft quite a long time about that, local newspapers, church groups representing the pagan and the witchcraft faith or philosophy or way of life, I guess would be the best way to determine it, with our local Simi Valley Interfaith Council. Runs the local Witches of Simi Valley group, has a Facebook page, and also what's the other one? The Daily Witchcraft? The Daily Witch. Facebook? The Daily Witch. That's a great page. I just love being on that. So welcome, Wendy. Good to have you. Good to see you. It's and to be able to talk about what you do and how you do it.
Thank you. So basically, hopefully we can dispel some errors and rumors and so forth this evening. So I'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, so you've put together a slide presentation for us to kind of take us on a tour of the faith or the philosophy. What do you call it? Do you call it a faith, a philosophy, a way of life, a religion? What do you call Wiccan and witchcraft?
We're going to kind of get into that because for some of us it's a faith, and for some of us there isn't a faith aspect. So I will explain that to the best of my ability.
All righty, we're ready. Take us on.
I'm just going to do an overview because it's a very deep and complicated subject with lots and lots of differences. So
belief systems can definitely be that. We're ready. Take us on a tour.
All right, let me get started here. Okay. So this is one of my favorite pictures of a witch. This is I Married a Witch with Veronica Lake from 1942. I like this movie especially because when we were first married, my husband, who is a Christian, gave me this movie. So I thought it was kind of apropos, kind of cute. So just to talk about a little bit about what this is. So pagan is a follower of a polytheistic religion or lifestyle. So sometimes religion, sometimes they consider it a lifestyle. Polytheism is the worship of or belief in multiple deities, which are usually assembled into a pantheon of gods and goddesses who each have their own religious sects and rituals. A lot of these things, you may have seen some of these things that are on the screen, and you may have heard of some of these. Most holidays and traditions have symbols that are used by other faiths today have their roots in much older pagan origins. There's no end of churches and cathedrals, for example, in Europe that were built on top of pagan holy places. And that was to help bring the people to the new faith and demonstrated dominance over the new faith. Pagan beliefs and cultures never ended. They still exist in the world. A lot of people, especially modern witches such as myself, a lot of believers in Wicca and other forms of paganism, just keep themselves secret in the broom closet, as we say sometimes, to keep themselves hidden. Unfortunately, due to the fact that there are other faiths that have demonized and spoken ill of the pagan gods and culture and people, and so all of that is historical fact and something that you can read about yourself. I mean, there's just no end of TV shows, documentaries, places online where you can see those histories. But polytheism and paganism is a huge umbrella. So I can't speak for all of it, of course, but just kind of touching on some ideas. So let's talk about witches, because that's what everybody really likes to know about, especially at this time of year. So what Wicca is the one that is the most familiar to most people. And Wicca is a neo-pagan religion. So Wicca is considered a religion, a faith. It was actually created by Gerald Gardner in the United Kingdom in 1954. So it is new, hence people are often called neo-pagans today. We celebrate the cycles of the moon, which are Esbats, and the sun, which are Sabbats. And Wiccans will tell you, and other witches will tell you, not all witches are Wiccan. So very often, people often say to me, "Oh, you're Wiccan." And I'm not, but I just say yes, because I understand that that's what you understand. So that's, I'll just say that, yes, that's what I am. So what is a witch? Well, a witch is a person that practices folk magic. So that's the craft part in witchcraft. And it can be part of a religious faith, as mine is, or it can be someone who just practices the craft part, but they don't really have a faith attached to it. It's also important to remember that Wicca and what they have an AKA, also known as witchcraft, is a legally recognized religion in the United States. So that's just a little bit of information from some censuses and information of the growth of Wicca and persons who believe in pagan thoughts. So witches in popular culture, everybody's favorite witches right here. So here's some witches that you might have heard about or even watched. All kinds of different shows here, all kinds of different themes. But witches make really good TV and really good movies, always a popular subject. And a lot of people like to watch about it and like to wonder about it. And on occasion, some of it that you see in different things, some of it's even the real stuff. Like obviously you can tell when they've had, oh look, they obviously had somebody there, acting as a person to show them, what to do as far as rituals go. So what does witchcraft look like today? This is Doreen Valiente. She is kind of known as the mother of witchcraft. And this is one of her best quotes. This guy is not a part of witchcraft. This is the number one question and the number one assumption, and sadly, the number one teaching of some faiths, that this guy has something to do with witchcraft and something to do with things like Halloween. And it's just not so. It's not a part of anything that is taught. And there I have the one of the best lines from Practical Magic. There's no devil in the craft. That made the whole movie when that was said. So the pentagram is something that often scares people. Now, other groups have used the pentagram to scare people and have dolled it up some with goats' heads and things like that, and people get very scared of that. But a pentagram is actually a really ancient symbol, and you'll even find it in some churches if you look carefully enough. So a pentagram is the most common sign that a pagan or a witch would wear, say for jewelry, a necklace or a ring or something like that. And it really is just as common as the cross is for Christians. The points on it stand for the earth, air, fire, and water directions. And then the top is spirit. And then there's some people that will say, oh, but if it's upside down, it's for evil and all of that kind of thing. Just like anything and everybody else, if you are intending evil on somebody, that's the person doing it. That isn't a symbol that you're wearing. So all of that upside down, inverted pentacle versus upright, that there's really nothing to that. So these are the holidays, as it were. They're called the 8 great Sabbats, and Sabbats are from sunset to sunset. So nightfall one day through to the day the next day, and it ends at nightfall the next day. So these 8 are, as you see, Imbolc, which is the first quickening of spring, Ostara, which is the spring equinox, Beltane is May Day, Litha is summer solstice, Lunasa is the first harvest of the year, Mabon is the autumn equinox, and it's the second harvest of the year, and Samhain, not Samhain, not the Ghostbusters character, although although we are familiar with that. Samhain is the old year and the new year, so it's the last harvest. And then, of course, there's Yule or Yuletide, which is the birth of the sun, S-U-N for us, S-O-N for a lot of the rest of the world. So tools of the trade. What are these witches doing with this stuff? So here's some cauldrons. And of course, these things became synonymous with witches back in, the witch hunt days, but a cauldron was something everybody had in their home. That's what you cook your food with. So I guess it's logical that you would cook your other things in there. But we do use cauldrons, and we mostly use them for safety, because if you have something that you're going to burn, some herbs or incense or a spell packet or something like that, you do it in one of these, you're pretty safe. Nothing's going to catch on fire. So there's an example of some different kinds of cauldrons. There's the big metal ones like that, or there's small ones made of ceramic and all kinds of different things. The broom, or bassoon as they're called. So the broom is a symbol very, very attached to the witch because of flying. The broom originally was considered both a masculine and a feminine symbol. So back in the day, Wicca, a lot of the tools had male or female connotation, like anytime there's a chalice or the cauldron, those things were considered a feminine symbol. The broom is unique in that it's considered masculine and feminine. So the handle being the masculine and the brush being the feminine, and the joining of the two stands for just exactly that. So the joining and the fertility. So the witches riding brooms comes from ancient rituals that were done in the fields, where the people would get the brooms and they would basically ride them, jump with them around the fields to shake the fertility down onto the field, so that the fields would be able to be very fertile for the next year. Because all of these things in what we look at with most modern Wicca, it all comes from Western European areas and times. So even for instance, Litha or Midsummer, it's June 21st, which for us is certainly not the middle of summer. But in that part of the world at that time, when these things came to be, it was midsummer. So the broom is another very popular symbol. Wands and blades. So a lot of people familiar with wands these days because of Harry Potter. Wands could be very powerful. Wands and blades both were considered masculine tools, and they're used for pointing. So the one on the side here, that's the crescent moon shape, that's referred to as a white-handled knife, and that's only used for cutting herbs. The two at the top are just different versions of a ritual knife, also known as an atham, or some people call it athame. Either one is fine. Those blades only cut air or cords or string or something like that. There's no bloodletting in like the Wiccan practice at all. Wands are different. Wands can be made of different woods, and you would then have the power of whatever wood your wand was made out of. Some of these have crystals put on the top. Some have symbols, scratched into them. So the use of, do you use a wand, or do you use an atham, or a little of both here and there? That's up to the individual. You don't even have to have any of those. You could just use your hand or a finger if you were pointing, casting a circle. The most common use of any of these would be to cast a ritual circle. So oils, herbs, books, and crystals. Of course, those are things that every witch has at least a little of. So the herbs would be something that you would combine herbs according to what your goal was. Certain herbs have certain properties in them believed to enhance spells for certain things, certain directions. The oils are basically just oils that are made with the various herbs. And there's all kinds of things like that out there on the market. But it's really easy to make your own. It doesn't take a whole lot of research to do that. And then of course, books. Today's younger pagans and Wiccans, I'm not sure that they read as many books as we did back in the day. We didn't have anything else. There was no internet. And so you could just hope to go to the bookstore and find a book on witchcraft. Going to the library was a little rough because the books were usually that were on these topics were usually not there. They were either always checked out, or somebody, maybe made off with them or something like that. And then of course, crystals have become very mainstream friendly now, and crystals are similar to herbs in that each of the stones has certain powers that are of certain vibrations that are attributed to it. So those things can be used in a spell petition. A spell petition is a piece of paper that you would write your spell on, or what your intention is. And there's different ways of doing that. If there's a person that's involved, you would do things like where you would write the name a certain number of times, one way and then the other way going across. And there's ways that you might roll the spell up, or you might tie it up or fold it up and bind it up, depending on what the intention of the user is. And things like having certain crystals nearby, incorporating certain herbs and oils onto the petition helps towards your goal. So this is just a little shot of some things you might see on the typical altar. So there's some chalices there. There's an offering plate. Most Wiccan, again, not all, but most Wiccan ceremonies would include something called cakes and ale, which would basically be you would have some kind of a bread or cookie or something, and in the chalice you could have juice or wine or whatever you want. And you're basically sharing amongst the group that's there, the bodies of the Lord, the Lord and Lady, and you're taking, a bite. And then, the wine is basically, one of the things we often say is, may you never thirst, when handing the cup of wine around. So you don't hunger and you don't thirst. You might also have a little bowl for water and a little dish for salt, and then of course your atham. So here's some spells in action. The one on the plate with the flame burning is an example of what a spell might look like. You can't see it, but the candle is sitting on top of a piece of paper that has been doused with oil, and it's burning down for a purpose. Adding fire causes transformation. Fire is the tool of transformation. So that's often used in spells. That's why candles are lit. And then when you need a longer candle, you can use those, like on the other picture, the larger 7-day candles. So here's altar icons. Very often you'll have some sort of statue or icon that you can put on the altar. And depending on how your worship is, if you have a faith base to it, so you're going to ask a god or goddess to help you, if you have an image of them, you might have that on your altar, and then you would put the offerings in front of it and so forth, and then you could ask for help with your petition, your prayer. I mean, we call it prayers too sometimes, and people say, well, you don't pray, but there's all kinds of praying. I mean, praying is just talking to the divine ones, however you see them, and asking for intercession. So this is kind of what you're seeing here. Here's another example of some altars that you might see. So those rabbits are there symbolizing spring. That altar was set up particularly for spring. And then you have another one with the triple goddess statue there on the blue cloth. And then the one in the center is my current altar, the way that it's set. So that one has an offering on the altar with the candles lit, and there's incense. You can't quite see the incense going, but there's incense going and so forth. So all those things we put for our god or goddess, and we offer up those things. So familiars, not all animals act as familiars, but those that do can be pretty persistent at trying to come into circle when they want to be noticed and add their own energies. And it can be dogs, cats. Cats are the most common ones, but I've heard of people saying that people say they have a ferret that's or sometimes they have a rat, or they have, it could be almost anything, but I've heard of people having all kinds of different animals. That's my little guy right there. So divination is something that we use quite often, and there's of course different kinds of divination. And here you see an example of some tarot cards, a crystal ball, palmistry, and then even tea leaves. Not all witches or Wiccans or even pagans do all of these things. But divination is something that we do a lot, especially if somebody was going to do work a spell for whatever reason. You're going to do some divination to get guidance on something. And you can also use divination just for questions. If you are really wanting to know a little bit more about a situation, then you might use divination to help you along there. Not, like I say, not everybody does each of these things. Tarot is probably one of the most common ones. Things like crystal balls or black mirror gazing, that takes a little more, and that's usually not something, despite the fact that you see on movies someone looking in a crystal ball, it usually takes a little more concentration than a 10-minute reading for someone. So what about metaphysical abilities? Well, many witches have one or more of these things, but we work at improving them. And you don't have to be a witch or a pagan or anything to have these abilities. There's plenty of people that find themselves the owners of some of these abilities. And it can be kind of scary and frightening when you first realize that it's happening. But you can manage the fear with training, so you get used to it. For example, if you are somebody that, maybe you see ghosts. The first time it happens, it probably scares the heck out of you. And then after that, maybe the second, third time you kind of get used to, like, something's going on here. So you learn to, to deal with it and to appreciate it. So our sacred spaces, we don't have, we don't usually have a building or grounds exactly. There are some temples in different places of the world where they do have these things. But any of these things here would be a great spot for ritual. We prefer to work outdoors if we can, but of course, we are modern witches, so we probably wimps a lot of times and end up working indoors when we shouldn't. So, but we really should try to always work outdoors in nature. And, depending on the weather, of course, here in California, we're lucky because we have a lot of really good weather. Yeah, what's not to love? So here's some that are commonly known, but also your living room. This is my living room. It's kind of crowded. I don't normally do things in here. Luckily, I have a bigger yard to work with out there, but any of these places would do. So these are just some more examples of what an altar would look like. The one at the bottom that has the round cloth, that would be a more typical Wiccan altar. Usually on an altar, you will have basic things that I already mentioned, like you might have an offering, and an offering could be, in this case, it's flowers. You can have an offering. You almost always have fire, so fire can transform your words, your thoughts, your prayers, or something that you might burn that can send that to the gods and goddesses. And that's a close-up. That's my own goddess, Hecate, which is in the Hellenic or Greek pantheon. So all the great stories have witches in them. Am I right? I mean, they do. And that's a picture of my current altar there. So finally, our friend Halloween. So I'll tell you what Halloween isn't. And of course, this comes up every year. Halloween, it very much has to do with the dead. Oh, yes. But it has to do with the blessed dead. It has to do with your ancestors, those who have gone before. welcoming them back, or doing prayers for them. One of the things we do is set what's called a dumb or dead supper. So if you sit down to eat at All Hallows, you put an extra plate of food, and you're basically inviting them to come and partake the way they used to do. You see a little bit of this, and it seems to be better understood. You see a little bit of this in the Day of the Dead festival, when they say, well, bring the things that they like and put them on the altar, and it's a way of honoring them. It's the same thing. Now, while Halloween and Day of the Dead are not exactly the same, they're similar in that way. It's about your beloved ancestors. It has absolutely nothing to do with killing or blood or Jason or Freddy or any of those, Mike Myers, any of those people like that. It has nothing to do with evil and nothing to do with the devil. Absolutely nothing. So that is a teaching that we would really, really like to see the end of. Celebrating it does not make you in any way some sort of, mean you're looking in the wrong direction, at that red guy that we crossed out earlier. So here's the Witches of Simi Valley Facebook for those who are truly practicing witches or pagans and have wondered, is there any in Simi Valley? They're here. They just are a very kind of closed community. A lot of people don't want to be outed, as they say, because unfortunately, like I explained earlier, even in 2021, you can still get, certain kinds of harassment. Sad, and it's very sad. But this is one of the main reasons that I joined the Simi Valley Interfaith, is to try and shed some light, as it were, on the practices of pagans and witches, and to let everybody know that we're here and we're your neighbors, and we do all the same things you do, and we're here in your community. So if somebody is interested in joining, they can go to the Facebook page here, and I would say please be sure to respond to the membership questionnaire. And finally, happy Halloween. I hope everybody enjoys their Halloween and does whatever makes them happy. And hopefully you're dressed as a skeleton or something like that, and you're not dressed as like a Freddy or one of those things, because that just encourages it. Don't encourage it. It's not about killing. It's not about murder. And that is it. That is my last slide. So let me stop my share.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. The Zoom applause or jazz hands, that was super comprehensive, and really you covered everything, so many things. I had so many questions that came up, and we have a number of questions in the chat. So I'm going to use the opportunity that I have as the first person to speak, and then I'll go to the chat and ask all the questions that those folks had. I noticed that one of the things I noticed is how easily individualized the practices can be. So whoever you are, however it works for you, you get to create your own version of witchcraft or witchery for your life.
That's very true.
You talked briefly about spells. What are spells used for? And in particular, do you need the permission of someone when you, I guess would be, cast a spell? And how are you using spells? I come to you and I say, I'm dealing with a self-worth problem. Is that what you cast spells for? Or do I need a job? Is that what you cast spells for? Or how does that work? What is the story behind it?
So a self-worth would be a little more difficult. That I might, depending on our relationship, talk you up a little bit and that kind of thing, but that isn't really so much a spell. Something like that, you might say, there's this kind of crystal that can take away negative thoughts and things like that. You can wear one. A lot of times when you wear something right over the heart chakra, that can help with that sort of thing. Something like get a job. Okay, so there are lots of herbs and oils that you could mix up and use for something like that. But remember, the universe respects action. So don't mix up a spell, say your words over it, pray to the god or goddess, and then just sit there and go, well, okay, where's my job?
Yeah. In our faith, we have something called treat, which is a form of prayer, and then move your feet. So
Yes.
what I'm hearing you saying is that the energies that are in crystals, that are in oils, that are in the earth, that are in the vibration of life itself can help create the climate for us to move into the action that brings about the manifestation we're looking for. Would that be a correct way of looking at it?
And basically you're using, so remember the witchcraft part, it's a folk magic. So you're using the energies of plants and crystals and fire transformation and these different things. And you're mixing them together. And by doing that physical process also, that locks your mind into it. So your prayers and your intentions are all focusing on that particular thing.
Last one, and then I'm going to go to the Q&As. Well, two of them. One, the rapid growth. It looks like this is just exploding with some of the new age self-help, individualized expressions that are going on for people. So was that why you think it's growing so much? Why do you think that witchcraft is growing so rapidly, as you showed with those?
That it's hard to say exactly why. Part of it is one of the things about paganism and even some witchcraft is that, as you explained earlier, you kind of are your own guide and your own boss. And people aren't used to that. They do better sometimes if there's someone telling me exactly how to do it. And there are traditions that you can join. A tradition is, or a trad, as we say, it's like a denomination. So there are denominations that go like this, and there's certain rules.
Got it.
And nothing wrong with that. That's better for some people. But a lot of people are really attracted to being able to think out of the box and think and plan for themselves. And they're getting in touch with nature and the rhythm of the seasons, the planets, all of that. That's a huge part of witchery. And people are very attracted to that. So especially,
it sounds like a very, it sounds like a very shamanistic, animistic kind of, I'm with the earth, I'm of the earth, I'm of the elements, I'm one with all, and feeling that energy and how that drives you might lead you to a particular branch, denomination, or just
like if somebody stands out under the moon, they read a little something about it, and well, I wonder if this really works, and they go and they stand under the moon and they have their bare feet on the earth, and they might actually feel this rush of energy, and they're like, whoa, there is something there. But those are the natural energies that exist all around all of us.
Okay, let's go to the questions. Here's one from Barbara Heath. She says, are spells cast in a specific language? Do they have defined words, or does each individual make it up?
Yes. So
okay, next question. You got that, Barbara? All of what you said is absolutely true.
Yeah, all of the above. So yes, you should always make your own, or at least add to a spell to personalize it to you. In certain practices, like in my own, there are many spells where there are words that are in like late antiquity Greek, which are very difficult to say, but I do my best. And yes, you need to say those things, but also that you can say that part, and then part you don't know. I mean, I add stuff in English because I figure, like, I like to think that the goddess is multilingual, and she understands no matter what I say. So actually, it's a really good question, Barbara. Yes, you can do both, and you always should add some of your own words to a spell.
Cool. Hey, okay. Here's one from Lorraine. Says, what sorts of things are spells? Well, we talked about that. What sorts of things are spells meant to accomplish? We kind of covered that one a little bit, I think, right? We were talking about how you were talking about various things spells can do.
People use them for all kinds of things. You know, prosperity, for instance, that's one that everybody always wants, right? Why not be more prosperous? So hey, you can burn a candle, or you can do a little more. You can, you know, wear some stones that attract money. There's different things that you can do. So most of the time people do spells for money or for love. I don't recommend the doing it for love thing. That's a whole other thing, but yeah, I don't. Because you know, when somebody wants a love spell, what I say is, let's do a love spell for you to love you, because when you love you, then others will love you. So,
in that vein, here's one from Kent who's asking, are there common do's and don'ts in witch life?
I would say when you're basically one of the most common ones, which I feel is a little bit forgotten about these days by, you know, maybe newer folks, is when you're going to do a magical working, you need to create a magical space. So draw a circle. You need to make a space for yourself. And if you're going to be working with a god or goddess or spirit, you need to purify. And that can be anything from, you know, taking a ritual bath beforehand, you know, so that you come to the deity, you know, a clean and pure, as it were, or, you know, the use of oils that you might rub on your hands and anoint yourself, that type of thing. So basically creating sacred space and protected space, depending on the work you're doing.
I noticed you emphasize sacred space a lot with the altars, your home, the outdoor nature location, and all that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering, one of the questions is where do witches think, this is from Kent, where do the witches think the power comes from to animate spells and practices? Where's the source of the juice?
From the power of the earth, from the power of the stars and the universe. And then those of us who have it as a faith, when I am doing a spell, or you can call it a prayer, which I do every day, more than one time a day, to my particular goddess, I am addressing her. So I'm asking for her intercession and assistance. And so that power and energy comes from her.
Speaking of power and energy coming from places, someone asked what, and you spoke a little bit about it with the animals, but what is a familiar? And can a person be a familiar? Can a tree be a familiar? What does that term mean?
Usually it means, so it's called a familiar because it was thought, and again, this is back to the witch burning times in Europe. They said these witches, they have a familiar spirit. So they would say a spirit has come in the guise of a cat or a rat or a toad. But of course it's an evil spirit, and it's whispering things and speaking to this person and making them do the devil's work. So a familiar spirit is really the whole term. We still use the term familiar today, but we say familiar more in the sense of this is an animal that is in tune with me and puts itself, and they put themselves in your work. So they like the energy, and they add a nice energy also.
You're talking about energy and all the different ways this stuff is coming to us. And there's a question here, because we live in this world where science and faith sometimes collide. The question is, you've mentioned things that have their unique energy. This is from Dr. Oops, it just jumped. Hold on a minute, let me go back to it. Here it is from Dr. Oskui. Pardon me if I messed your name up. I'm not going to spell it for you though. Okay, so that you mentioned things have a unique energy, herbs, crystals, etc. have there been scientific analysis to identify and quantify those energies, or are all those beliefs faith-based around the energies of things? I know with oils, there have been some analysis of oils and how they work. With crystals, there's been some work around vibrations and how they work. But do you find there's a both and, a either or? Is there science involved in it, or is all coming from the heart and from the soul?
The only thing that comes to mind in regards to science is, the quartz crystal is the kind of the main crystal. And of course, quartz and crystals are used in electronics and so forth today. So they're used in science for these kinds of things, and for, transmitting and energy, capturing energy and so forth. I don't know that I've read a scientific paper about that. Smoky quartz, so the darkened quartz, that removes negative energy. I can't say that I've read that, but that's not to say that witches don't follow science or believe in science. But sure. I guess when we're doing these things, we're tapping into a lot of unseen feelings and forces, and a lot of this stuff, the herbal lore, especially, it's very, very ancient. And of course, the herbs are known to cure people of certain diseases and that type of thing. And
if you look at Chinese medicine, right. You look at some of the more traditional faiths, some of the Orthodox Church, even Catholic churches with the incense and the sacred water, the holy water, there's been some tie between that. And I was also struck with something else you said, and it's kind of in one of these questions from Stacy. You talked about how many cathedrals were built on top of pagan sites. Mm-hmm. And I also know that what I've come to understand and have seen through some of my own studies is that there was a desire to incorporate groups of people into the global church, as it was originally called, the Catholic Church, the global church, by bringing some of those techniques, some of those teachings into the church, right? And so the one that struck Stacy, and also me as well, was the similarities between communion and the sharing of cakes and ale and witchcraft, and the saying that you shall never hunger again, may never thirst again. That's something that's very similar said when you take the body of Christ in Eucharist. Mm-hmm. So is that where you find the tie-in, that there's a tie-in between what are probably more modern or current religions and paganism, which is clearly more ancient?
Yeah, there's a lot of places where things intersect, and I think that we don't always realize it. Many ancient practices have had people giving offerings to the gods, and then even some of those offerings are either presented to the god, but then the people that are presenting them, they will partake in the offerings after the god has had the essence of it. So there's things like that. Pagan sort of cakes and ale that's practiced today is something that is found historically. Did the church get it from them, or did the neo-pagans get it because a lot of them used to be churchgoers?
Right.
Say today. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Chicken and egg.
But it's a similarity, yes.
You mentioned gods. There were some questions about that. Is there a higher power in witchcraft, witchery, and even in Wiccan? Or are there multiple powers, and is there a centralized space to call sacred, that you call sacred?
No, because each individual person or tradition has their own. So somebody might follow a Celtic pantheon, pantheon where they have a lord and a lady, or a god and a goddess, and it's always these two in particular that they worship, that they petition for assistance or this type of thing. Then you have people that have groups or covens where they might, hey, today, or this month, we're going to use Egyptian gods, and then next month we're going to use Greek gods, and then we're going to use some Native American. People do that kind of thing too. You have people exploring the different powers. That's the thing about it, is that there's no central command center for witches or pagans. Like there's no Vatican per se. There's nothing like that.
Right.
There's just each there's individual covens that practice a certain way. Plenty of people are what they call solitaries. They do things on their own, or they get together with small groups of people known to them to practice.
Here's a slightly more technical question. Someone asked, would you explain more about the meaning of slicing air with a knife?
Okay, so the most common reason that that's done, so if you're standing in circle and you formed a circle, and everybody's seen the circles on in Practical Magic, and the women all have the circle with the broom and the different shows that we talked about. You're standing in circle and you're doing something, and somebody forgot something. It's the worst thing. It's like, because we already pointed, with the Atham, we already cast the circle, the energy. So now you got to make a door. So it's very common to see somebody like literally cut a door, which is cutting the air. And if you leave the circle, you go through that door, and then you come back, and then you take the door out. So that's one of the most common ways.
All right. So it's to create a threshold, or to make a transition, or to move energy. And the energy.
Yes, you would have to move it because you've made a protective locked energy there.
Okay, now here's another one that was interesting, and I found that interesting too. Well, it's two things. One, about the flying. I did a little reading beforehand, and there was another witch, an oracle, who talked about, there's no actual witches on brooms flying around, but there is a way to like teleport yourself in a psychic sort of sense, that you can fly in a spell to visit someone. Are you familiar with that? Does that make sense about flying?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things that you can do. I mean, people can learn to do astral travel is another term for that. So you can learn to be in a sort of a almost semi-conscious state, and purposely, leave your body and go over here or over there, to visit, someone, or to see something, or that type of thing. So that's something that people have done, I mean, for ages. That's something that is historically documented, with people saying, about flying. Another thing about witches and flying is there's something people call flying ointment, but there are people that deal with poisonous plants, but they're highly trained to deal with them. You should never deal with poisonous plants unless you're highly trained, but they deal with them, and they'll make something called a flying ointment. And it basically is something that is made, and you can put it on the body, and it can make you just easier to get into a headspace to do astral travel. I don't know the plants off the top of my head, but they're but these are things you can actually buy.
That's interesting. There are doctors now who are using plant-based medicine to help with things like trauma, to help the body release energy. So that's an area where your science and faith are kind of coming together.
Yes.
We're just about done. There's something that's pretty common around so many different faiths. It's called the golden rule. Is there a kind of a golden rule within the world of witchcraft?
There's some Wiccans, not all, and have something that they call the Rede, which is, and it harm none, do what thou will, meaning do what you want as long as it doesn't hurt someone else. That is not every witch follows that. It basically is something that sits on you, just like anybody. Are you going to, do, like, people like to ask about curses? Oh, do you curse people? Can I get you to curse somebody? First of all, that takes a lot of energy. So, and you should never do something like that when you're upset, emotionally upset. But if you're going to do that, that's the same thing. I mean, no one ever thinks about praying for someone to have something bad happen to them, but I'm sure there's people that do it. There's no rule that says don't do that, but I think a common rule really in most people's humanity is don't do that. If you don't like somebody or there's a problem, I mean, you can just stay away from them. You know what I mean? You don't need to try and aim, bad feelings and bad juju at them, so to speak.
You are part of a group called the Witches of Simi Valley. I know we're just about done, so it's kind of a pitch. Do you come together and do you call them a coven? What do you call your group?
A coven? No, we don't. The group, the Witches of Simi Valley, is a fairly new group that I made, and I made it so that people who practice witchcraft or pagans in Simi Valley would have a place where they could come and sort of see that they're not alone, because there's people that think, oh, there's no one else here that does this but me, or no one else that thinks like this. Well, there's a lot of people to different degrees that practice these things. So yeah, basically, we haven't gotten together yet. There's not a
service time. You come at 10 o'clock on Tuesday and we're all going to get together.
No, I dare say, I mean, I could guarantee you that even the people that are in there, nobody's practice is the same. Yeah, we haven't had any. We've talked about maybe having a get together at some point, but it came together in the time of COVID, so we haven't done anything.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much. Wendy Sengpiehl, beautiful. I learned so much. Our team that's here tonight learned a lot about witchcraft, and we look forward to finding out more. You can find out more through the Simi Valley Interfaith Council on Facebook. You can also go to Witches of Simi Valley, answer the questions, and be serious. It's not for like curiosity. And there's another one that you said, Daily Witchcraft.
It's the Daily Witch, and which is
the Daily Witch
page. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Daily Witch, a Facebook page. You can find out more information about witches locally around the world. And yes. Great. Oh, got to remind you that coming up, we've got the in-person Interfaith Thanksgiving on November 23rd at 7 p.m. You can find that on our Facebook page, and that's at Simi Valley Interfaith Council. So we'll see you at 7 p.m. on November 3rd. That's a Tuesday night for our Interfaith Thanksgiving. Hope to see you there for that.
Yes.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Old treats, no tricks.